Now, almost 2 years ago at this point, and shortly after the release and relative box office failure of Solo, Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, said they'd done too much too soon with the Star Wars franchise. He essentially said that Star Wars fatigue was an issue and that, going forward, they were going to adopt a less is more approach and focus on quality over quantity, that basically we should expect a slowdown of content. And at the time, this mostly felt like an attempt, and a bad one at that, to explain exactly why Solo did so poorly, why it ended up being the first Star Wars movie to lose money, when in reality the reasons for, again, its relative failure were many and complicated. This was a movie that came off the heels, or 6 months after, the most divisive Star Wars movie ever, and this was about a character that, sure, most fans do love, but it's a backstory no one was really asking for. And I think we all knew at the time that no real slowdown was coming, that hopefully perhaps there'd be a slight cool down phase where they'd take a closer look at the real reasons Star Wars was struggling and regroup and actually have a solid plan going forward. Because, let's be real, Disney didn't pay just over $4 billion to use this franchise sparingly. They didn't spend that kind of money to run it like George Lucas did, where we'd get a new trilogy every generation or so, and that even within the trilogy there was a 3-year gap between films. Disney primarily bought it to make money off of it and as much as possible, and well, to make sure no competitor got their hands on it either, not that they don't just seem to buy all their competition. Anyway, they bought it to profit off of it, and for the most part, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with giving them my money as long as what I get back is a quality product that actually is made by those who understand and care about Star Wars. In theory, that's the way all transactions should work. Both parties involved get exactly what they want and end up happy. And in this case, there's also those in the middle who hopefully love working on Star Wars and get to continue to do that. You may not love the idea of handing your money over to a mega corporation, but at the same time it does fund the work and dreams of those actually making the content that we ultimately get to consume. But I digress, and my point here is that there was no way Disney was ever going to slow down with Star Wars, not for any real length of time. Yes, we're in a bit of a pause, but that's only to build up to the next big wave. Disney certainly realizes that streaming is the future, or heck, let's be real, it's the present. And as I've speculated many times before, don't be surprised if, soon enough, there is almost always something Star Wars related running on Disney+, locking fans into staying subscribed for, well, forever, if you want to keep up with everything. And though again, right now we're in a dry patch for Star Wars content, this is probably the last one we'll ever really see again. There are not only a lot of projects already in the works that we know about, and I'll go over them all here in a bit, but there are plenty more rumored to be in development. Last week we even learned that we'd be getting a new animated series based on the Bad Batch from Season 7 of the Clone Wars, which I think caught some people by surprise because not only was the big rumor that we'd be getting a sequel series to Rebels, but that series seemed like the obvious choice. I mean, Rebels in many ways already felt like a sequel to Clone Wars, so it made sense to sort of keep that mini shared universe within the larger Star Wars universe, for lack of a better name for it, going. Though yes, obviously Bad Batch is a sequel to Clone Wars in its own way as well. But anyway, especially when we consider the way Rebels ended with Ezra missing and Ahsoka and Sabine about to start searching for him, the logical conclusion then, and now, was that that story would be continuing somewhere soon enough, and likely in the next animated show, if we exclude Resistance, of course, which was just a straight tie into the sequel trilogy. Either way though, there are still rumors and people who claim to have sources within Lucasfilm that say that the Rebels sequel is still happening and that it will be announced soon enough. And though that's certainly a possibility and what I hope to be true, I do have my doubts, especially if these are both full shows with 20-some episode seasons each. Because you're then talking about Lucasfilm Animation pumping out a total of 40 to 45 episodes a year, and if they're putting them on Disney+, fans are going to expect them to look good. They're going to all but demand animation the quality level of Clone Wars, and that is a lot of work and money to pull off. And sure, maybe one or both of them will have shorter seasons than we're traditionally used to. Season 7 of the Clone Wars was only 12 episodes after all. That's certainly a possibility, but either way that doesn't sound like a slowdown on Star Wars content. Having 2 animated shows running, on top of the live action shows, sounds like quite a bit, especially if they would end up being both full shows or again having some 20 episode seasons. Because assuming, and I think it's a safe assumption, that they will continue their trend of releasing episodes of shows weekly instead of in bulk or all at once like Netflix does, for example, 2 full shows would cover 40-some of the 52 weeks in a year, which, yeah, as I said, is their goal, to always have something Star Wars related running on Disney+. But then you're almost needlessly going to overlap with the live action shows, And we already have confirmation of 4 of those in the works. We of course have The Mandalorian, which as you know is already going, and Season 2 comes out this fall. We have the Cassian Andor series, which we still know very little about, but there's been casting announcements, and this thing is in pre-production. It is happening despite, shall we say, maybe lukewarm reception from the fans. It's a series no one really asked for, though that of course doesn't mean it won't be good or even great. Then we have the Kenobi series, which yes, will only be 1 season, but if it's successful, which I'd be shocked if it isn't, don't be surprised if they return to that well and give us another season anyway, or if they don't do more shorter one-off series like it. Then we also have the series coming from Leslie Headland, which was confirmed by Lucasfilm a few months ago, that we were told is going to be female-centric, which could mean it's actually the rumored live-action Ahsoka series. And speaking of rumored live-action series, there are plenty of others that are supposedly in early development or being discussed as possibilities. Again, in the not-too-distant future, there will be something new Star Wars related on Disney Plus almost every week, if not multiple things weekly if all of these rumors are true. And none of this takes into account films, which Disney and Lucasfilm are certainly not done with. In fact, there are supposedly multiple films in the works right now, though very little is known about any of them. The most recent we learned about was back on May 4th of this year, when it was announced that Taika Waititi would be directing and co-writing a Star Wars film along with Krysty Wilson-Cairns. Back in February of this year, then, we learned that J.D. Dillard would be directing a film that was to be written by Matt Owens, with the big rumor being it would involve Exegol somehow. Last fall, we were told that Kevin Feige would be producing a Star Wars film, and reports seem to indicate it would be more than just one film, and that he was going to be part of a much larger or bigger effort, or maybe multiple films. Then, of course, there is the promised Rian Johnson trilogy, and though we've heard nothing about it in an official capacity for almost 3 years now, Johnson himself does still insist it will happen. And look, I've spoken my piece before about this project multiple times, and honestly, I just can't see them bringing him back to do more Star Wars, much less a whole trilogy. I just don't see them bringing back the guy that opened up such a huge rift in the fan base, but who knows, I suppose. We also can't forget here the world of video games, where EA recently said they would be doubling down on Star Wars after the success of Jedi Fallen Order and Battlefront 2. And though we can certainly ask what took them so long to double down on Star Wars games, when the franchise has a long, rich history of great games that were heavily supported by the fandom and general gamers alike, anyway, if they keep their promise, it'll be even more Star Wars. Then there's also the High Republic publishing effort, and though if we're keeping it real here, a lot of fans don't partake in the books and comics, if this is successful with those who read them, it could certainly spawn more content in different mediums down the road, even though right now it will strictly just be books and comics. Then there's of course the usual slew of books and comics, including yet another publishing effort that will be centered around the Mandalorian series. So basically what I'm saying here is brace for a lot more Star Wars in the coming months and years. Despite what was said by Bob Iger less than 2 years ago now, there is no slowdown, at least not one that's going to last much longer. And this is where I'll be curious to hear what you all have to say about this. Because, as I basically said before, I'll take as much good Star Wars as they want to give us, within reason of course. I don't think people will get fatigued if it's all or mostly good, but there is a point where it would almost feel like a chore for some people to keep up with it if there's too much. Anyway, I know a lot of people out there think Star Wars is dead or dying, or just don't care anymore. But there's nothing I'd personally like to see more than the right people brought in to revive this franchise, or should I say, make it what it should be. And I do think there are some major shakeups behind the scenes happening at Lucasfilm or about to happen, especially with the way the sequel trilogy is being all but ignored right now. I certainly think Disney and Lucasfilm realized the mistakes made with it, and with Star Wars in general. And as I said, when you consider the main goal for them is to make money off of it, changes are going to be made to make sure that happens. A year from now, Kathleen Kennedy's contract will expire, and I do think she will step away from Lucasfilm. I do think it's the perfect time or perfect way to mark a changing of the guard or approach with the franchise to signal an eye towards the future. And so I'm curious to hear where you stand on Star Wars here in the post-sequel trilogy era. Do you want to see Disney and Lucasfilm go all in and try again? Or do you feel it's just too late? Or do you maybe want to see it happen, but you're cautious and skeptical? Or do you really not care anymore and don't think you'll get vested in Star Wars again, no matter what they do? Or perhaps you'll only give it a chance again if, say, Kathleen Kennedy is gone and leadership is changed. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments and tell me what you think. Where do you stand right now in regards to Star Wars? What are your hopes for the future? Or is all your hope gone or nearly gone? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.